In The Young and the Restless, danger does not always arrive with noise or warning. Sometimes it slips quietly into the lives of those who believe they are untouchable, weaving itself into their habits, their choices, their blind spots, until by the time it reveals its true form, escape is no longer an option. What begins as suspicion quickly mutates into something far more unsettling, a chain of events that feels too calculated, too precise to be coincidence, and at the center of it all stands Nick, a man who once defined himself by strength and control, now drifting into a version of himself that no one around him can recognize, least of all the man he used to be. Matt does not trust instincts lightly, but what he witnesses that night is impossible to ignore. The dim glow of a parking lot becomes the stage for a moment that refuses to align with anything Nick has ever represented. The secrecy, the tension in Nick's posture, the quiet exchange with a man whose presence radiates danger, all of it feels wrong in a way that cannot be explained away. Matt watches from a distance, capturing fragments of truth through a lens, convinced that whatever Nick is involved in, it is not a mistake but a descent. Yet even as he records, a deeper unease settles in, because something about Nick's behavior suggests not indulgence, but restraint, not recklessness, but calculation, as though every movement is being performed under pressure rather than choice. That unease becomes fear when Matt is attacked before he can act. The violence is sudden, efficient, and deliberate, leaving no doubt that he has crossed a line someone was determined to keep hidden. The message is clear without being spoken. Nick is not operating alone, and whatever he is entangled in has layers that extend far beyond a simple transaction. When Matt collapses, the evidence still in his possession, the narrative begins to shift, from suspicion to conspiracy, from individual failure to systemic manipulation. Meanwhile, Nick's behavior continues to deteriorate in ways that appear increasingly erratic to those around him. His temper fractures under pressure, his judgment falters, and the incident that nearly claims a life becomes the turning point that forces everyone to confront what they have been trying to deny. The accident is not just a moment of loss of control, but a warning, a signal that whatever is happening is escalating, and yet the aftermath raises even more questions than the event itself. The scene is cleaned too quickly, the evidence disappears too easily, and the silence that follows feels orchestrated rather than accidental. Someone is not just covering for Nick, but controlling the narrative, ensuring that the truth remains buried beneath layers of manufactured normalcy. Victor senses the disturbance before he understands it. For a man who has built his empire on control and awareness, the presence of something he cannot immediately identify is intolerable. He initiates an investigation, deploying resources, leveraging connections, expecting clarity. Instead, he encounters resistance, not direct, but insidious, as though the very systems he relies on have been compromised. Reports are altered, leads dissolve, and the more he pushes, the more he realizes that this is not a threat he can confront through conventional means. The idea that someone could manipulate not just individuals but the infrastructure itself forces Victor into unfamiliar territory, where power is no longer absolute and certainty becomes a liability. Matt's awakening in the hospital marks the moment where suspicion gives way to revelation. The narrative he presents does not align with what everyone believes they have seen. Nick, he insists, is not a man succumbing to addiction, but one being forced into it, manipulated through methods designed to create the illusion of dependency while masking a deeper objective. This reframing changes everything, because it transforms Nick from a cautionary example into a target, a pawn in a game that is far more complex than anyone anticipated. The evidence Matt carries, combined with what he has witnessed, begins to unravel the surface narrative, exposing cracks that lead to something far more dangerous beneath. The leaked video becomes the catalyst that shifts perception entirely. In it, Nick is no longer the man spiraling out of control, but someone fighting to escape a situation that tightens around him with every attempt to break free. The threats are not abstract, but personal, directed at those he cares about, forcing him into compliance through fear rather than choice. This revelation introduces a new layer of urgency, because it suggests that the situation is not just about Nick's survival, but about the safety of everyone connected to him. The stakes are no longer individual, but collective, and the consequences of failure extend far beyond what anyone is prepared to face. Phyllis's discovery adds another dimension to the unfolding crisis. Her past, Something she believed had been buried, resurfaces in a way that feels both inevitable and devastating. The connection between that past and the present threat is not immediately clear, but it is undeniable, and it places her in a position she cannot ignore. For someone who has spent years navigating chaos, manipulating situations, and maintaining control over her own narrative, this loss of control is both unfamiliar and terrifying. The realization that she may be the next target forces her to confront not just the danger itself, but the possibility that her own actions may have contributed to its creation. As Matt continues to dig, the pieces begin to align in ways that defy expectation. The figure behind the operation is not an outsider, not a distant enemy, but someone embedded within the very structure of the Newman family, someone who understands their dynamics, their weaknesses, their patterns. This revelation shifts the conflict from external threat to internal betrayal, transforming the situation into something far more volatile. Trust becomes impossible, suspicion becomes instinctive, and every interaction carries the weight of uncertainty. The idea that the enemy is not outside, but within, destabilizes everything, forcing each character to question not just what they know, but who they can rely on. Nick's confrontation with Matt becomes the emotional core of the story, not because it resolves the conflict, but because it exposes the depth of the deception. His admission that he has been playing a role, that his apparent dissent was a calculated move to infiltrate the network, reframes his actions in a way that is both admirable and tragic. What began as a controlled risk has spiraled into something unmanageable, where the boundaries between performance and reality have blurred, leaving him trapped in a situation he can no longer navigate alone. The burden of that choice, the weight of maintaining the illusion while losing control of the outcome, becomes evident in the cracks that begin to show, in the exhaustion that cannot be hidden. Yet, even as the truth emerges, even as the pieces begin to fall into place, the resolution remains out of reach. The confrontation that should bring clarity instead reveals the scale of the operation, the extent to which every move, every decision, has been anticipated and manipulated. The sense of victory is fleeting, overshadowed by the realization that what they have uncovered is only a fragment of a much larger design. The final twist does not negate what has been revealed, but expands it, reframing the entire situation as part of a broader strategy aimed not just at individuals, but at the very foundation of the Newman Empire. In that moment, the true nature of the conflict becomes clear. This is not about Nick, not about Matt, not even about the immediate players involved, but about power, about dismantling a legacy piece by piece, about exploiting the vulnerabilities that come with strength. The manipulation of Nick was not the goal, but the method, a way to destabilize, to create fractures, to weaken the structure from within. The realization that everything they have endured, every risk, every loss, was part of a larger plan transforms the narrative from one of survival to one of impending collapse. And as the dust settles, as the characters grapple with what they have uncovered, one question lingers with unsettling clarity. If this was only the beginning, if the chaos they have experienced was merely a step in a much larger design, then what comes next may not just challenge their control, but destroy it entirely, leaving behind not just a broken empire, but a family forced to confront the possibility that their greatest enemy has been watching, waiting, and planning from within all along.